A silent crater. 8 calm years. And then without warning, Etna's entire summit began to fail. Why did Voragine, the oldest vent on the mountain, suddenly awaken with 6 explosive eruptions in just weeks? Why did a crater long dismissed as harmless turn into Europe's most urgent volcanic threat? And if this was only the first rupture, what deeper instability is still building beneath the peak? Because the real danger is not just the eruptions themselves, but what they reveal: a summit system destabilizing from within. Stay with us, because the explanation begins with the mistake everyone made. For 8 years, Voragine was treated almost like a footnote on Etna's summit. Tourists wandered freely across the rim. Guides spoke of its quiet temperament, and its long dormant fury faded into memory. But Etna's summit has never been shaped by the present alone. Long before hazard maps and modern sensors, the peak formed under forces both ancient and volatile. Rising more than 300 years above Sicily's eastern plain, the summit is capped by several craters, each carrying its own history of violence and rest. Voragine, carved into the older summit in 1945, is the oldest active vent at the top, a relic that has watched the mountain evolve through the modern era. Unlike the restless southeast crater famous for its near-continuous lava fountains, Voragine drifted through decades with little more than thin gas plumes and the occasional mild explosion. For scientists and guides, it became the calm place on the summit, a pocket of apparent stability where visitors could look straight into Etna's heart without fear of sudden volatility. And even when Voragine did erupt, its episodes were spaced apart by long stretches of calm, reinforcing the belief that its eruptions were rare exceptions rather than warnings. Yet history proved otherwise. In 1998 and 1999, more than 20 powerful paroxysms sent fountains and ash plumes skyward, affecting nearby towns. In December 2015, 4 paroxysms in just 3 days included lava shooting nearly a kilometer above the rim and ash rising 3 kilometers into the atmosphere. These events were reminders that even Etna's quietest vents can unleash overwhelming force. But after May 2016, Voragine slipped back into stillness. Gas plumes, thinned explosions faded, and for 8 years, the summit felt tame again, its silence shaping both public perception and scientific expectation. Beneath that calm, however, Etna's summit system continued to shift. Deep fractures, migrating magma, and small deformations worked relentlessly out of sight. By early 2024, few outside expert circles even thought of Voragine. Its reputation was one of deep time and rare spectacle, a feature of the landscape rather than a threat. But age and silence on a volcano never guarantee peace. When the oldest summit vent reawakened with sudden force, the surprise was not only the violence itself, but the idea that a crater considered nearly retired could return with such intensity. For the people who live along Etna's slopes, the mountain is not just scenery, it is livelihood. Before 2024, summit tours were part of a reliable rhythm that shaped each summer. Guides led visitors past old lava fields and steaming vents, stopping at Voragine's rim for panoramic views and quiet moments above the clouds. Operators like Salvatore, whose family had worked these routes for decades, remember when Voragine was simply a peaceful stop on the map, safe enough that school groups stood at the edge without hesitation. This predictability fed the local economy. Tens of thousands of tourists bought cable car tickets and booked guided hikes each year. Cafes in Nicolosi and shops in Zaffarana thrived on the steady flow of visitors. When Voragine slept, insurance costs stayed low and hazard warnings felt like routine formalities. Even guides trained to watch for danger focused more on shifting weather than sudden volcanic violence. Trust in the summit's safety deepened with every uneventful season. Gas plumes drifting from Voragine were dismissed as harmless breath from a healthy volcano. The dramatic paroxysms of 2015 faded into memory, and by 2019, summit excursions were as routine as ever. Etna people said always recovers, it always gives back. Families built their income around that belief, managing their year by the mountain's moods. But those who knew Etna best never forgot its darker moments. Salvatore's father still scanned the summit each morning, noting changes in the color of the gas, fresh cracks on the rim, or a trace of sulfur on a still day. He remembered ash falling like black rain in the late 1990s when roads were closed for weeks. Those memories, buried but not erased, resurfaced the moment Voragine reawakened in 2024. When the first explosions echoed across the summit, guides confronted impossible decisions. Should they continue leading groups upward? Should they trust years of apparent stability, or listen to the unsettling signals rising from below? For local families, each new eruption became more than a natural event. It was a question that cut directly into their future. Would the season collapse early? Would bookings vanish? Would the mountain that sustained them become the mountain that held them back? On Etna, stability has always been temporary. Every eruption redraws the fragile line between livelihood and loss, between a volcano that provides and one that can take everything away in a single night. July 4th, 2024. After 8 years of quiet, the summit broke its silence with a shockwave. What began as a night of modest Strombolian bursts at Voragine escalated into a full eruption. Lava fountains climbed 1,200 meters above the crater rim, roaring for more than 8 hours. Ash surged nearly 5 kilometers into the sky. By dawn, Catania's airport had closed, and streets across the city lay under a coat of gray. Thermal cameras confirmed the eruption's scale: 3.2 million cubic meters of lava, enough to temporarily push the summit to a recorded 369 meters. Just 3 days later, on July 7th, a second paroxysm erupted. Though shorter and less voluminous, the fountains tore upward again, with ash columns rising to 9 kilometers above sea level visible across eastern Sicily. Each eruption stressed the summit's structure, sending fresh flows down the western rim and burying nearby craters in new deposits. On July 15th, a third eruption struck. A pattern had begun to emerge. Each paroxysm was shorter than the one before. Each fountain slightly lower, each volume a fraction reduced. Lava still surged hundreds of meters high, but the system's power was unmistakably ebbing. The summit changed with every pulse. Lava pooled in Bocca Nuova ash, and scoria piled on the crater rims, and the landscape shifted almost by the hour. July 23rd brought the fourth eruption. Again, the activity was briefer and less intense. Scientists monitoring the sequence saw a clear trend. The eruptions were systematically draining a shallow reservoir beneath Voragine. Every event was logged in real time. Heights, durations, volumes, the numbers charted a finite store of magma being tapped repeatedly, its force diminishing as the chamber emptied. Then came a pause. Nearly 2 weeks of relative quiet passed before activity surged back on August 4th. The fifth paroxysm revealed that the reservoir could partially recharge in days, not months. Lava spilled over the rim once more, overlapping the paths of earlier flows. The sixth and final eruption arrived between August 14th and 15. Tremors spiked through the evening. By midnight, fountains blazed above the crater, and ash climbed 9.5 kilometers into the atmosphere, forcing another airport closure. At the summit, new lava flows reshaped the terrain yet again. Across 42 days, 6 explosive events unfolded. Together, they discharged an estimated 12 to 15 million cubic meters of magma, the full measured capacity of the shallow reservoir beneath the summit. For scientists, it was a rare chance to watch a summit system under strain in near real time. For those living in Etna's shadow, it was a reminder that stability here is always temporary. High above Etna's slopes, a silent network of thermal cameras watches the summit without rest. Known as the EBT and EMCT stations, these instruments do far more than record bright patches of molten rock. Their mid-infrared sensors capture thousands of frames every hour, each pixel encoding a temperature. This allows scientists to see not just glowing lava, but the precise motion of heat as it rises in a plume or creeps across the crater floor. At the Osservatorio Etneo in Catania, volcanologists and engineers monitor these feeds around the clock. The operations lead, a specialist in automated analysis, oversees software that converts raw thermal images into immediate actionable data. As soon as an eruption begins, the system isolates the hottest pixels, the core of the fountain, the front of new lava flows, or the emergence of a sudden vent. It tracks the highest point of the fountain frame by frame, translating angle and pixel position into meters above the crater rim. Every second becomes a new data point, building a timeline of the eruption's power. But height is only the beginning. Using the physics of ballistic jets, the software estimates how fast magma must be traveling to reach those heights. By combining exit velocity, vent area, and duration, it calculates discharge rates, the volume of magma expelled each minute. As a fountain roars, the system integrates these rates into totals, revealing how much of the reservoir is being drained and how quickly new land is accumulating at the summit. Quality controls guard against fog, rain, or ash that might distort readings. Frames with interference are flagged automatically, and human supervisors adjust parameters when needed. The cameras are radiometrically calibrated, but for real-time eruption tracking, relative change is what matters most: where the heat moves, how fast it rises, how the fountain's shape shifts from moment to moment. Later drone surveys and satellite images validate these measurements. But during paroxysms, it is the thermal network that captures the most detailed account of the eruption's unfolding dynamics. Each event becomes a graph, a curve of rising power and gradual decline. The draining of the shallow reservoir is no longer a mystery. It can be watched as it happens, quantified second by second. For the monitoring team at INGV, these live analytics guide critical decisions, hazard alerts, airspace closures, and the evolving assessment of how much magma remains beneath the peak. What once could only be inferred from distant plumes or delayed surveys can now be measured with remarkable precision. Etna's violence has become in effect a controlled experiment documented in real time. Beneath Voragine's battered rim lies the true engine behind the 2024 eruptions, a shallow reservoir capped not only by magma, but by a dense volatile-rich foam. This layer, formed from millions of gas bubbles rising through basaltic melt, sits just 1.5 kilometers below sea level, roughly 3 kilometers beneath the summit. Over weeks or months, gas accumulates at the top of the chamber, thickening the foam until it reaches a mechanical breaking point. When that fragile ceiling collapses, pressure surges upward, driving magma and gas violently through the conduit. The result is a paroxysm, towering lava fountains, vast ash columns, and a sudden depressurization that ripples through the summit. Researchers at the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology pieced together this mechanism using thermal camera analytics, seismic signatures, and field measurements of eruption deposits. When they compared each 2024 event to the model, the match was unmistakable. Across 6 paroxysms, the system expelled between 12 and 15 million cubic meters of magma, essentially the estimated capacity of the foam-capped chamber. The declining size and duration of the eruptions aligned perfectly with the gradual draining of a finite reservoir. Unlike the southeast crater, whose shallower chamber produces frequent smaller outbursts, Voragine acts like a slowly charging battery. It stores energy over long intervals, then releases it in clustered, powerful bursts. This explains why Voragine's eruptions rarely appear as isolated episodes. They come in sequences, each one triggered by the collapse of the gas-rich foam, each one revealing more about the hidden architecture beneath the summit. With every eruption, the summit becomes a natural laboratory. Scientists can observe the reservoir's behavior, measure how rapidly it empties, and detect how quickly it begins to refill. The more precisely the system is monitored, the clearer it becomes that the summit's apparent stability rests on a delicate balance of gas and magma, a balance that can shift with little warning. On the desk of Sicily's Civil Protection Office, a single-page briefing from the Osservatorio Etneo drew a stark line between science and risk. Based on the summer's eruption data and the foam-capped reservoir model, the document warned that the sequence was not finished. Calculations showed that even after the August paroxysms, enough magma remained at depth to fuel 1 or 2 additional major events. As long as the chamber beneath Voragine was only partially drained, the summit retained the ability to reload, sometimes over weeks, sometimes over mere days. Each paroxysm had already sent between 400,000 and 1.1 million cubic meters of lava spilling over the western rim, covering summit trails, filling adjacent craters, and threatening the fragile infrastructure perched near the peak. For civil authorities, this was no academic observation. Every overflow required new hazard maps, updated closures, and decisions about when to halt summit access or restrict air traffic. The memory of ash-choked runways in Catania lingered heavily over each meeting. Local officials faced pressure from all sides. Scientists urged caution. Business owners pushed to keep tours running. Residents feared both economic loss and volcanic danger. Meanwhile, thermal cameras continued to show faint but persistent heat signatures beneath the summit, subtle hints that the system was recharging even as the surface grew quiet. The risk was immediate, not theoretical. Any pulse of seismicity or sudden rise in tremor could signal the start of another explosive fountain. For the thousands who live and work on Etna's slopes, the message was blunt. Monitoring tools may now be more advanced than ever, but as long as the reservoir remains partially filled, the threat persists. Preparedness is not optional. It is the only defense against a summit that can shift from calm to crisis without warning. Right now, Etna stands on a knife edge. Its gas-rich reservoir is reloading beneath millions of lives and crucial flight corridors. Each new tremor is not just a geological signal. It is a reminder that one of Europe's most active volcanoes is never truly at rest. It only waits. What would you do if the warning came tomorrow?